Hey, it's Jared. Let's compare the new M4 iPad Pro 13-inch. This is the 2 terabyte model. This also has 5G internet connection. And then we also have my M2 iPad Pro. This also has 5G and is the 1 terabyte option. I've been using this iPad for the last several years, I guess since it came out, and it's been great, but it hasn't really been the computing device that I had hoped, not due to performance issues or anything like that, mainly due to the comfort of use. And I've been using the new iPad Pro M4 for the last several days, and I have to say I'm loving the form factor of the keyboard, and that is making all the difference for me. And it also feels snappier and a handful of other things as well. So let's take a look here. You can see I have them side by side. You could tell that the keyboard is actually quite a bit longer, which definitely helps with balance. And on the back side here, there's more that sticks out of the back of the M2. So I think Apple really did a good job with the keyboard on the M4. You know, people have been kind of confused as to what an iPad's supposed to be. Apple said it's not a laptop, it's a tablet. Then people want to use it as a maybe laptop replacement. And I think we're finally in that place where iPad OS has enough features and enough functionality to where you can use it for most things that you would use a laptop for, but now it also has the comfort and the things that we would expect from a MacBook, like a nice big trackpad and a better keyboard with a function row and all that good stuff. But as far as performance goes, like, is it worth buying an M4 iPad Pro when you can get an M2 on sale right now because they're older models? This was the question that I asked myself when I was trying to decide, should I jump from the M1 MacBook Pro to the M3 MacBook Pro? And for most people, I decided, hey, based on performance, you could save a bunch of money and get an M1 MacBook Pro here in 2024 and be great, have everything that you need. But is that the case with the iPad? Let's take a look at the performance and see if we actually are going to get much of a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and pop them off of their cases so that we could put them side by side here. I do have to say that, in my opinion so far, I think that the keyboard case is the number one selling factor for me of the new iPad Pro. The new iPad Pro is basically the same size as far as height and width goes as the old iPad Pro. I have the nano glass here. This is the nano texture glass, and I'm really liking that in comparison to the non-nano textured glass of the original iPad. And so if we hold the iPad up here, this is the M2 iPad, you can see how much glare I'm getting from my light over there. And now if I do the same thing with this iPad, which is definitely more of a challenge to get off of the table, you can see that I'm not getting any glare on the screen. I'm getting glare on the bezel. So no glare on the screen, just glare on the bezel. And that really shows the performance of the nano texture on this iPad, which I really like. So we're going to go ahead and open up Geekbench 6 and do some tests and see what we get as far as performance goes. Now, I have ran these tests individually on these iPads before, but never side by side. And let's go ahead and run those benchmarks. Now, I started them pretty much at the same time. You can see that I'm basically at about the same battery life. I've got 88% here and 89% here. I have been using my iPad M4 today, and I was charging up my M1 after it used up a bit of battery, transferring all of its data over to the M4. So both of these iPads have basically the same apps. Actually, the M4 has a few extra apps that I've installed in the last couple of days, but they're basically the same configuration. They both have the same OS. The M4 is essentially a complete backup from the M2 iPad. So as far as used storage and all of that stuff, pretty much the same, with the exception of the fact that the M4 here has the 2 terabytes. All right, the M4 just finished up, and you can see our single core score of 3,750 and the multi-core score of 14,571. The M2 is still working, so I'm going to go ahead and save my results to the Geekbench website. I save all of my results so that way I can go back and view them and compare them to previous models. So we've got that saved and backed up. So let's get back to Geekbench and compare our scores. Over here we've got 2,628 for the single and the multi-core of 9,509. So that's a pretty significant boost in performance. Now let's do a GPU benchmark. Let's go ahead and run that now. All right, and just over 1 minute, we have a score on the M4 of 53,713 with a score on the M2 of 46,378. Now we're going to jump over to Geekbench ML, and we are going to test the performance here of the Neural Engine. Let's go ahead and switch over to Neural Engine on both of these devices. We should see a pretty substantial difference here due to the increased performance of the M4 and the capabilities that Apple is building into it for hopefully the future use of AI as Apple starts to implement that into its technology. And on the M4, we have a score of 9,453. On the M2, 7,402. Next, we're going to look at 3D Mark. We're going to use the Wildlife Extreme test and test the graphics performance of these devices. Let's go ahead and hit start on both of those. All right, it looks like we're seeing around 50, mid-40s to 50 frames per second over here on the left-hand side. Obviously, this is loaded a lot faster and gotten started a lot faster. Over here, we're seeing about 30 to 40. When there's a lot more movement, it drops down closer to 30, but now it's kind of jumped up. But over here, we're seeing pretty close to 60 frames per second. It'll be interesting to see what the overall score is. All right, so over on the M4, we have an overall score of 8,208 and an average frame rate of 49.2. So that's pretty close to 50. We'll just round up for that. And over here on the M2 iPad, we have a score of 6,497, pretty close to 6,500, and an average frame rate of 38.9, so pretty close to 40 or so. I'd say pretty close, about 10 frames per second difference between the two of these, and then a pretty decent difference in the score as well. Next, we're going to look at the read and write to storage and see which one has the better performance. We'll go ahead and hit start on both of these. And it's going to do a really quick test to see what our read and write speeds are. And we have finished on both of these. On the M4, we have a sequential read of 2,000, basically 2,900, and a write of 2,650. Over here on the M2, we have a slightly faster read speed, and that could have to do with the fact that this is a 1 terabyte as opposed to 2 terabyte. And then we also have a write speed that is significantly slower. So the write speed here is 1,200 opposed to the over 2,600 over here on the M4. Now, when it comes to the random 4K test, we have a read of 10,246 and a read of just under 10,000 here. So a little tiny bit better performance on the M4. And then the write test of 8,091, that's about 31.6 megabytes per second. And over here with the M2, we've got 7,347, which is just under 29 megabytes per second. And you can see when we look at the latency scores, as far as read goes, we have a slower latency or less latency in the read score and a little bit more latency in the write score. Now let's do a stress test. Let's go ahead and hit start, and we will do a 10 gig stress test. Essentially, what happens with memory is that as you write heavily to it, it does heat up and you start to have little issues, and there could be performance changes there. And so now we're looking at the stress test writing 10 gigabytes, and what we want to see is something nice and even. We don't want to see something that tapers off with performance degrading over time. Both of these have pretty straight across, but as you can see over here, we've got a much higher speed with data writing at 3,000, just over 3,000 megabytes per second, with over here just under 1,400 megabytes per second. So you can see a lot more data was written faster over here on the M4 than what is on the M2. Now, why do some of these tests matter? Well, performance matters if you're going to use this device for heavier lifting, if you're going to be editing photo, editing video, creating music in Logic or GarageBand, or gaming with heavier games that require better graphics. The M4 is going to perform better, obviously, because it is a faster chip, both in CPU and GPU performance, and it has better read and write speeds. But is that going to matter too much if you are a casual device user? If you're casually using an iPad for occasional gaming, for browsing the web, listening to music, Netflix, all of that good stuff, do you need the performance of the M4? And I really have to say, no, you probably don't. We are going to look here at a few tests where we are going to test the actual performance in more of a workflow that I might find myself in. So we're going to open up Lightroom here. Adobe Lightroom I find myself in quite often. I use my iPad for Lightroom a lot. When I get back from a shoot, for example, this real estate shoot, I load everything into the iPad and sit down and edit some photos. I like being able to use my Apple Pencil and the nice interface that Lightroom has on the iPad to just edit photos and get through those more casually. Usually it's kind of an end of the day thing as opposed to grabbing my laptop or being stuck at my desk. So we have a library of 69 images and they are stored locally. So you can see that I have downloaded these locally to the iPads, so they are stored locally. Now we're going to go ahead and export all of these. So I want to select this and we're just going to go ahead and select all of these. We'll do the same thing over on the M4 and select all of these images. We'll go down to share and open up that. And I'm just simply going to save copies to device. This is going to save the images to my camera roll. Alternatively, I can also export these to files in a specific folder, which probably would be the better option. But let's just go ahead and tap on save copy to device. And let's see what kind of performance differences we get here. This is where I would see benefits in using my iPad, is in the instance of exporting large amounts of images. Usually when I'm done editing images, I'll either share the Lightroom library with a client or I will move all of these images, exporting all of them into a Dropbox folder so that my client can access those images there. And so speed is definitely important as far as exporting these images because it could take a lot of time. If I'm exporting a couple hundred images, I could be sitting there not really able to utilize my iPad for quite some time. Around 70 images is a rather small amount of images that I typically would be capturing for a client, but on a real estate job, it's about average. Okay, the M4 iPad is just about to finish and we're going to time the difference between the M4 and the M2. As soon as that dialog box goes away, I'm hitting start on the timer so that I could time the difference between these two devices. Obviously, the M4 is finishing faster and is about to be done right now. And we have about 6 images left on the M2. So obviously the M4 is faster at exporting these images, but is that enough time savings? If I was only going to be exporting maybe 20 or 30 images, it definitely wouldn't matter. The M2 is definitely going to be more than fast enough for me. And even so, this is probably only going to be a couple of minutes slower. And in the grand scheme of things, is that enough of a difference for me to be purchasing a new device? So if you're like me and you edit a lot of photos, trying to decide is the M4 worth upgrading from the M2? Let's see here. We're about to be done over here on the M2. Looks like we're probably going to be around a minute slower, I guess, just under a minute. So 52 seconds slower. That's not terrible. And, you know, go grab yourself another cup of coffee, something to drink. You'll be back and it would be done anyways. So that's not too bad, but it definitely is increased performance over here on the iPad Pro M4. Now let's turn our devices to the side and take a look at Final Cut Pro for the iPad. I don't typically do much video editing from the iPad, but I want to do more video editing on the iPad. And now that I have the new M4 with the better keyboard, or better keyboard in my opinion, I think it will be more useful. So let's just kind of scroll around this timeline a little bit here. I don't feel like there's any more jitteriness or anything like that from the M2. Everything is really nice and responsive. Playback is really fast. I'm not obviously running into any issues there, but let's go ahead and export and see which one is going to export faster. Let's tap on video, and then we will include video and audio. We'll go with the full resolution of this particular video. We'll leave it at default presets, video codec HEVC, and we will export and see which one gets done faster. So over here, and I mean, this is a small video, so it's not a very large video. We shouldn't see too much of a difference, but the M4 definitely did finish faster than the M2. Negligible for sure, but if we were recording a full-length video like this and editing it on an iPad, maybe a video that's 15 minutes long, we probably would see a substantial performance difference in the M4 iPad. All right, now let's do a speaker comparison. We've got full volume on the M2 iPad. Let's hear it. and full volume on the M4. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Can you tell a difference between the two? Personally, I do think that the M2 is a little bit more fuller with the audio. There's probably a little bit more room to move around in the audio chambers inside of this iPad than on the M4, but really it's hard to tell the difference. And I do have a little bit of a case on the iPad M2. It's definitely not covering anything up. As you can see, the full opening of the speakers on both sides are not covered. There's nothing going on there, but I have to say they're pretty darn close considering the fact that the M4 iPad is so much smaller. It still has pretty amazing sound. Now, I obviously haven't had much time to watch any TV or movies on the M4 since getting it, but the difference comes down to a couple things. First of all, the nano texture, which I really like the fact that the nano texture cuts down on glare. When I'm watching a show or something on my iPad, I'm usually in bed and there's a lamp or something that is always causing some sort of a glare in my room. I like having less glare on the iPad Pro M4. Obviously, as you can tell here, there isn't much of a difference in clarity. Being that the nano texture, of course, is going to soften the image a little bit, I haven't really noticed that much. I think it makes up for the fact that I'm used to glares and having some sort of glare affecting my overall image, whether I'm watching a show, editing video, or editing photos on my iPad. So the last thing to look at, obviously, is the Apple Pencil. Now, I have the Apple Pencil and I have the Apple Pencil Pro, and I primarily just use this for journaling and writing and marking up documents. I'm not an artist. I definitely don't have any ability to create anything fancy, but I have to say what I really do like about the Apple Pencil just in general is its responsiveness. Now, if I was using it in an environment with a keyboard case, you can tell that the M2 keyboard case is a little bit more bouncy, and that may have to do with the fact that I have a protective cover on the iPad that makes it a little bit heavier. But as I switch over to the Apple Pencil Pro, it definitely is a bit more responsive. One thing that was really cool right away was when I double tapped to get access to the eraser, there was that haptic feedback that let me know that it switched. When I'm in a journaling app like GoodNotes and I'm writing and I switch between modes, sometimes I accidentally do that. I might just double tap on accident on the pen and then switch into eraser, and then I start erasing instead of writing, and it can be kind of annoying. With the Apple Pencil Pro, it definitely does not happen because of that haptic feedback. If I accidentally tap, then I have that slight little vibration inside the device, and I know that I switched over to an eraser instead. And so it's very easy for me to notice that that takes place, and that for me is a great feature of the Apple Pencil Pro. So I double tap on this one. It actually took twice doing that, so it wasn't quite as responsive as the Apple Pencil Pro. Is it worth the extra money? Is it worth getting a whole new Apple Pencil? I really don't know. I have an Apple Pencil for my iPad Pro. I have an Apple Pencil for my iPad Mini as well, because I do a lot of journaling. I also am a private pilot and I fly with my iPad Mini, and so having an Apple Pencil that's dedicated to that definitely is beneficial. So while I'm not a power user of the Apple Pencil in the sense of the artist, I definitely am a power user of the Apple Pencil as a journaler, I guess you could say. And so far, I'm really enjoying the subtle changes that the Apple Pencil Pro brings to my experience. So to close out this video, I have some thoughts on whether or not you should go out and buy yourself an M4 iPad Pro. Now, everybody has been reviewing the 13-inch, and I have an 11-inch on the way because I really want to know, with the new keyboard case, is the 11-inch iPad Pro a better experience for me in the different ways that I would be using it, or is the 13? And so I want to compare those two. I'll probably come back and produce a video on that topic as well. So after all those tests, we basically started with the same amount of battery life on these devices. Yes, they were not charged exactly the same to 100%, but the iPad M2 is definitely going to have a little bit of battery degradation, being that it is older than the M4. And what we can can see on both of these iPads is 78% battery life left on both of them. And that to me means that Apple has done a good job, even though there's significantly increased performance out of the M4, at maintaining the same battery life usage. So however much time I would expect to get out of my M2, I can expect to get out of my M4 as well. So to finish out this video, is the M4 worth upgrading to? I know it might seem like it's a big jump because the M2 seems like such a small number compared to the M4, but keep in mind, Apple jumped over the M3, and there are definitely reasons for that. Other reviewers have talked about it. I might be a little frustrated because I have an M3 MacBook Pro, and I know that Apple is going to be trying to get away from M3 as quickly as possible. And so now with an M4 iPad, and we have older devices, M3, M2, M1, and then earlier generation chips, does it make sense for you to upgrade? Well, if you are using an iPad Pro primarily as a simple laptop, you're using it for web browsing, email, watching shows, different things like that, you do not need an M4 iPad Pro, and you might even consider going with an M2 iPad Air to save some money. That M2 iPad Air is going to be plenty powerful considering the fact that it has the same chip as this M2 iPad Pro. Now, if you need to have the Pro for whatever reason, maybe it's because you want this particular type of keyboard case, but you're not sure if you need M4 performance, you'll definitely find the M2 available from a lot of retailers at a lower price, so you can save some money there. We'll start to see prices decrease even more. I'll put some links down in the description so you can do some price comparisons. Right now, at the time of filming this, it's not a large price difference, but obviously that's going to change as more of the M4 models start to ship and become available. So for most people, if you have an M2, I don't think it's worth upgrading to the M4. Maybe even if you have an M1 and everything is still fine with that M1, you're getting good battery life out of it and everything is functional with that device still, I would hang on to it because the M4, while being a lot more powerful than the M1, is definitely not providing much more from a general user experience unless you're using heavier lifting applications like I displayed in this video. If you have one of the older edition iPad Pros, then you may consider actually making the jump now to the M4 iPad Pro because you've probably had that device for 5 years, maybe even longer, depending on which model you have, and it's time to upgrade because, like with my wife's iPad Pro, the keyboard case is given out on us once. We're on a second keyboard case, and that one's starting to kind of have issues. She definitely likes the Magic Keyboard case as opposed to the old flip style keyboard case that she has with her iPad Pro, so it would be a good upgrade for her. But is the upgrade to an M4 iPad Pro worth it, or is it better to upgrade to an M2 iPad Air? There's so many options out there, and it can be very confusing. So it's going to come down to how much performance do you need and how much do you want to spend. Obviously, the M4 is a very expensive device. Apple has put a premium price tag on this device. You can get the M2 a lot cheaper, and you can get even the more modern version, M2 iPad Air, for even less than that. So that's definitely something to take into consideration when deciding. Do you need all the performance? Do you want to spend that kind of money? Because the big question is, will you utilize all the performance that's in that iPad? I know that 90% of the time I won't because I'll be doing general web browsing, email, and stuff like that. But in the instances where I'm exporting a bunch of images and editing and doing those things where little performance increases every single task that I perform, saves me a little bit of time, that adds up and saves me time overall. So if you've been wanting to learn more about how to use your iPad for work or just to be more productive, I've got 2 courses that I think you might be interested in. First is my iPad productivity course. This is going to teach you everything that I use my iPad for to be more productive. Now, yes, we can do a lot of things and be more productive with a laptop, and there's more options available with a laptop. But with an iPad, it brings simplicity, it brings portability, and with the right tools and right things in place, you can be more productive using an iPad. So if you want to learn how to be more productive using a variety of iPad apps and how to get around your iPad faster, definitely check out that course. So as I said before, I've got links down in the description below to M4, to M3, and some of the other devices so that you can do some price comparison and figure out what the best model is for you. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about the new M4, maybe the new M2 iPad Air, and if you're considering upgrading, what iPad Pro or iPad are you coming from? I'd love to know that, so share that with me down in the comment section below. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you back in the next one.